Hi, this is Barry, and welcome to the Simplicity Zen podcast. My guest today is Helen Hobart. In 2010, she was ordained at the Plum Village Order at Plum Village into the Order of Interbeing. She's a board certified chaplain and works professionally in that field. She has been on the board of directors for both the Sacramento Dharma Center and the Sacramento Buddhist Meditation Group, otherwise known as SBMG. At SBMG, she has been board president, served on the scheduling committee, started the Family Sangha program, and has led core teaching and mentoring programs. Thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. So, I've known Helen as an acquaintance for a couple of years now. She's, been very involved in the SBMG, core, you know, founding member of that whole organization and the Sacramento Dharma Center itself. But very specifically, what I wanted to talk to Helen about was this podcast has been way too heavily focused on Japanese Zen lineages, and I wanted to start having more people from different lineages. Very specifically the Plum Village, Thich Nhat Hanh's lineage, and she very graciously agreed to come on and kind of educate us and tell us about that program, and and tell about her journey with that group. So you're not on the board of SBMG anymore, is that right?
No,
Yeah. In the what I touched on it a little bit. What are your active roles at SBMG these days?
I'm very involved in scheduling committee, which is the structure of creating the program. So
Hmm.
the Sunday morning sits, the retreats, workshops, classes. So that's quite a juicy piece of the work. It's a lot
Yeah.
of collaboration with the board and
Yeah. Sorry to
very,
I'm gonna interject real quick. I'm so sorry. We should probably let people know kind of the unique structure of the SBMG where there's no like teacher, like staff teacher. It's a pure led sangha, and then you guys invite speakers, and so that's the context of your work is where you're finding the teachers and Dharma leaders and Dharma communicators to come in and give talks and retreats to the membership. Is that correct?
that's correct. It is really not like many other sanghas across the country. Um, Reverend Bob Oshta from the Buddhist Church here in Sacramento has said, you're a step toward the future of American Buddhism because it is peer-led and eclectic, and all
Mm.
traditions are welcome. And I want to give credit. I wasn't a founder of SBMG. I came in 96, 97, but Jim Hare and Karen Hamilton and some others here um, created SBMG in response to the Iraq War, that they
Mhm.
just needed to get together with like-minded people to sit and find skillful response to the situation. So the good news is SBMG has managed to survive in this cobbled together, improvised way since 1991. So that's rather an impressive accomplishment, I
Mhm.
think.
It seemed like you were fairly instrumental in finding the physical location, the Sacramento Dharma Center. Is that
That,
correct?
it's collaborative, Barry. There's a lot of people that were irresistibly looking at properties when you go to the store. Oh, what about that aquarium building? What about that place with the for rent sign? I mean, it was a kind of epidemic of us, including the lovely late Linda Decker, looking around at all kinds of likely spots. So all of us were working together, checking places out, assessing the practicalities and the drawbacks. And our commitment was Midtown, of course. There's no parking.
Hmm.
So we recognized we had to bite the bullet and go farther from the center of town where our people mainly gravitated. So we wound up in College Greens area of Sacramento. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, what? So one thing I like about SBMG is, I mean, I very much like the formality and structure and kind of gravitas of Japanese lineage Zen. And maybe just because that's what I grew up in, like literally. And so I was still a teenager when I started practicing Zen, and
Uh,
so it's kind of in my bones. But I really like, there's something about going to the SBMG meetings where it's just relaxed and welcoming in a way that I'm not sure I've ever experienced in any other Buddhist group. I mean, there's very friendly Buddhist groups and very welcoming Buddhist groups, but it seems to be just at a different level at SBMG, I'm not sure I could even articulate why.
I'm glad that you picked
Yeah.
that up. We get that comment from a lot of people and teachers. Teachers tell us the same thing. And I think that's because we really have, partly through the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, recognized that the next Buddha could be a Sangha. Why,
Hmm.
why not us? Not really. I mean, that's not an explicit idea, but Sangha building means we're living the practice right here, right now, as we gather, as we do the committees, as we do all these things. So I think that's just wonderful. We don't practice in order to have something happen, but every step is the path. Yeah.
Hmm. As I was saying that, I wonder if it's the pure nature of the group that kind of contributes to that. There's not like even in somewhat democratic Zen centers, it's still pretty hierarchical and structured and status driven to some degree. Whereas it's maybe at best two levels of, you know, there's the people who show up a lot
Yes.
and volunteer, and then there's the people who come sporadically. And I mean, and that's like the entire seems to be the entire stratification of participation there, and so that probably helps contribute to that vibe, I imagine.
Yeah, we're it.
Hmm.
I mean, to me, that's the Buddha's teaching.
Hmm.
Be a lamp, each of us.
Yeah.
Oh, can I see your light or can you see mine? And how can I make it uh, available for other people when I have so many self doubts or whatever? Um, we're very free, but accountable.
Hmm. Um, so in your short little bio, we talked about both the family sangha and you created like a kind of a teacher mentoring program. Could
Hmm.
you talk about those programs a little bit that you do there?
Oh, quickly, the mentoring program is because we have a pretty strong commitment, or a few of us do, to help SBMG folks get teachers. It
Hmm.
seems to many of us longtime practitioners the best of all worlds is to be part of SBMG, which is peer led and eclectic, but have a teacher with whom you go deep and a
Hmm.
tradition where you're grounded.
Hmm.
So we would constantly want to encourage um, newer people to consider working with a teacher. And so, a step toward that, because it might seem a little bit remote or unfamiliar, is Dharma mentors,
Hmm.
that are composed of us in the Sangha. It hasn't taken off particularly,
Hmm.
but what has taken off a little bit more is Dharma Friends groups where people are learning from each other
Hmm.
in a more intimate way. The family sangha, I will sound as if I'm in La La Land because it's such a joy. It's so exhausting and such a joyful project to see children and their parents together. Parents are off their cell phones for the 2 hours.
Hmm.
Their attention is right here, right now, and the kids are taking that in. So all of the underlying circumstances of family sangha are a big, I think, teaching an environment of this is who we want to be. I mean, outside this safety, the world is harsh. But here at Family Sangha, we all are committed to being kind and honest. And um, parents need that as much as the kids, and they're each learning from each other. Seeing those things unfold, Barry, it's like the Dharma, and yeah.
Mhm.
full glow. It's
Can you
just
talk a little bit about the structure? What's a typical meeting like?
okay. Family Sangha. I have a parent co-leader, a wonderful man in the Zen tradition who's kind of moving toward SBMG named Ajit Vaidya with a child.
Mhm.
And we have a planning stewards group, pretty informal, of parents. So we meet once a month to have a quick discussion of how we plan the next thing and what the issues are currently.
Mhm.
Um, and people drift in about 10, and we start with a Thich Nhat Hanh song. We have parents who are very good at leading those songs. And then we have 10 minutes or 15 minutes of mindfulness. The little kids, 5 and under, go into the library. This is a big step. We don't want to exclude them, but they have a separate program because it's hard for them to sit still.
Mhm.
So the school age kids hear from a senior practitioner, or we go into SBMG and the teacher themselves gives a little teaching. And
Mhm.
then we discuss it a little bit, like we were talking about. Don't take, we've been doing the children's precepts, and that was don't take what is not given, what that
Mhm.
means in terms of generosity. And then we have so that's a little bit of quiet time, and then we definitely need to get the wiggles out. So we do some mindful movement. If there's time, there's a story, and then by 45 minutes in, we join with the littles and we pour out of the building to play outside. And
Nice.
lovely play and snack. Snack is highly important. So maybe that time we practice, can you give food to your sister before you eat it yourself? That
Mhm.
pause. Oh, oh, I could I could be generous. Uh-huh. Okay. Instead of eagerly eating what's out there. The playtime morphs into art, which is usually related to the theme, but not always.
Mhm.
And then we circle up, do a mindful cleanup as much as possible, and get in a big circle to say what my grandchild had offered: roses, thorns, and unicorns. Very Dharma, what we like, what we didn't like, and what we wish for. And so those children that are brave enough to speak up will say wonderful things. I'm wishing for ice cream, or
Mhm.
I wish I could come back more often, or yeah.
Nice. Do you, is it mostly elementary age kids? Do you get any tweens or teens?
It's ages 2.5 to 5 goes into the littles group just for that first 45 minutes.
Mhm.
But the whole group is really up to age 12. We want to help more tweens, but there's just a few of us putting it together, improvising constantly. So we usually have about 8 to 11 kids and similar number of parents, and
Mhm.
then about 4 volunteers.
Great. And that's with kind of no marketing except with, kind of within the local, the local sanghas that are part of that Dharma Center, right?
People find it on Google search and they show up, and it turns out beautifully. Yeah.
Great. Mhm.
Maybe they were exposed to Buddhism like you as a teenager, and now they want their kid to have something that counterbalances the culture's messages, and they want their kid to do that. But of course, the younger the kid is, the easier it is to bring them.
Mhm. And then the scheduling committee, is that, how many people are on that group? Is it a big group or?
No, I so much wish it were larger. It tends to be elders with knowledge and relationships with some teachers,
Mhm.
um, and some pretty solid grounding in the practice. It's a committee of Right now we have 3 active people, which is way too little. Ideally, it's 5 or 6.
Mhm. Is there ever any debate on who to invite, or
Yes, there are teachers who may not be accepted by Zen Center or other centers, and yet we have wonderful experience and history with them.
Mhm.
So, can we take into consideration the concerns, and can we feel safe having them, given that we have new students? So SBMG scheduling is very kind of looking out for ethical background of teachers, because we know we have people that are eager to sign up and find the truth.
Mhm.
We want to make sure that teachers are authorized and accountable, like to the Zen Buddhist Teachers Association. They need to be accountable. There are people, I mean, who could, I mean, we used to have Adyashanti. Now, I don't know to whom he is accountable, but our experience of him is so positive.
Mhm.
Of course, we're glad he can come when he can. Yeah.
I had so you guys had him once, and there was too many people to fit in the Dharma Center, so you had it some sort of auditorium or something. I think in East West Sac or something, and not West Sac, but Land Park area, I guess. Wherever it was, doesn't matter. And my friend wanted to go, so I went with her. And oh no, it was actually a different friend, a guy. So we went to it together, and and then another friend met us there. That's why I said she. There's 3 of us. I'm sorry, my memory's messed up sometimes. And during the whole talk, Adi Chandra's talk, I'm like, this guy looks familiar, and I couldn't, almost the point was it was almost kind of distracting me from his talk a little bit,
Ah,
and I'm like, I guess I'd just seen a picture of him before or something, but there was something about his mannerism and voice that was really ringing a bell.
ah,
And then it dawned on me, we were both at Sacramento at Sonoma Mountain Zen Center at the same time, and I'm like, oh, I remember that
ah,
guy.
that guy.
Yeah, yeah, and it was, but it was really weird. Like, I couldn't place him, and then it dawned on me, like, oh, I used to live with that guy
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
before before his name Adyashanti.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, nice, nice. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, sorry, that's a probably not a necessary digression, but it just
it's,
made me think of that memory.
it is how it is, because what happens since COVID is, how do we manage to get teachers every single Sunday? I
Hmm.
mean, every now and again, every 6 weeks or so, we have practice circles or practice talks. But other than that, scheduling's trying to arrange teachers to come. It's really relationship based, because Bay Area teachers, where most of them are, to schlep up to Sacramento is, it's not as attractive as it used to be now that we have Zoom.
Hmm.
So scheduling's very conscious that our friendship and relationship with teachers is more and more collegial, and
Hmm.
working together on what topic would work, and how can we help you be comfortable when you're here. And I think that's so rewarding. I mean, to be on scheduling, I have found to be a ton of work, but the reward is I'm in friendships with many wonderful teachers.
Hmm.
Wow,
Yeah,
who would have thunk it?
yeah. Are you also, is that same group select the people who lead the retreats that you guys do?
Scheduling creates the retreats.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
I've heard anecdotally that post COVID, you guys are not getting as many people to the retreats, and because there's so much Zoom retreats
Yeah,
out there. Is that accurate?
that's so much on our minds, is how do we persuade people to give up a Saturday or even a Sunday afternoon. And it's hard. Yeah.
More so
And
after
not,
COVID, right?
yeah, since COVID. Not It's not unique. I'm hearing it from like a big congregational church in Berkeley. How do we get people back?
Hmm.
It's, Commitment is not as readily available after all the intense number of changes and unpredictability we've gone through, I think, for the last 3 years. I think we're so used to things not being secure and unpredictable that there's a way that for people to sign up for a retreat even 4 days in advance, it, 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 it doesn't rest well.
Hmm.
So that's a challenge. Some people say, I know Susan Moon says in Alive Until You're Dead, the old structures of committees and organizing groups to create events is a thing of the past. There's more and more pop-up life,
Hmm.
more spontaneous stuff, more let's see what works out for this weekend and make it happen. I think we're in
I think
this.
there's a lot. I didn't notice that, but you're absolutely right. That has been a big change, and I think people's consciousness. Mm.
And how does a Sangha adapt to that? I really count on younger generation to lead the way, but they don't want to sign up to do committees in general.
Mhm.
So we're it's a very alive question.
Mhm. Have the core people that were involved with SBMG, did any of them kind of drop out over the pandemic, or did the group kind of, or did the band kind of stay together?
A few did drop away, and sometimes we see them on Zoom.
Hmm.
They don't come back in person. And there's a great influx of younger people coming because we moved the hours from Sunday evening to Sunday morning.
Hmm.
So that's also designed to help family Sangha parents join the sit or join the Dharma talk while their kids are at family Sangha. This is like a really precious thing because parents don't get access to the Dharma till their kids are, not needing babysitters. So the
Hmm.
move to 10 a.m. on Sundays has led to a shift. Also, some older people, that's just too early to get going. But for some other older people, it's better because you don't have to drive at night.
Hmm.
So many, many changes still in flux. Yeah.
The few times I've popped in, it seemed pretty full room.
It's it it's variable. And
Yeah.
if the teacher is in person, that certainly brings more people.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, so you work as a chaplain, right?
I did.
Oh,
Uh,
you don't anymore. I didn't realize that.
yeah, I don't think chaplains ever stop being chaplains.
Hmm.
Um,
But you were at Davis, is that right? Am I
I
remembering?
was trained
UC
at
Davis?
Sutter
That's
and
okay.
worked with neurology, and then I had my strokes, and that was very like, okay, Helen, now you get to really learn what you're talking about, to
Mhm.
have a strokes myself.
I wasn't aware of this. When did that happen?
Oh, I had two minor strokes in 2007 and then another couple in 2016.
I didn't realize
So
it.
those are, like any life crisis, it does wonders for your practice.
Hmm.
Things are no longer abstract about impermanence and
Right. Yeah.
the preciousness of each breath. I mean, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but there's nothing like life-threatening situation to get you real.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so then I did work at Sutter Center for Psychiatry, and I do feel happy about the happenstance that the administration changed and wanted to move off for the medical model toward a recovery model of partnership with patients.
Hmm.
And the way to do that, they knew, was something called mindfulness. And that was when I was taken on as a chaplain. So I became their person to teach the administrators and the staff mindfulness so that they could then bring that into the work with patients. And now this is rather common, but at that time it was exciting because it was pioneering.
Mhm. Do you do any chaplaincy volunteering or anything these days?
Barry, everything is chaplaincy, you know. My
Mhm.
neighbors just donated a kidney, and I stop and ask her things, but I listen.
Mhm.
I don't call that chaplaincy. It's just being a Dharma person. It's just being a person.
Mhm.
But there's a way that, yeah, I took on a chaplain role yesterday when a woman was speaking very volubly about her beliefs about um, how the world should be, and it was quite different from my beliefs. And I tried to understand this is a person who's quite lonely. Otherwise, she wouldn't keep talking at high volume and so impossible to talk with.
Mhm.
And so there's a chaplain consciousness, but I think it's also the Thich Nhat Hanh consciousness. And I think it's really our practice of being present, not turning away.
Mhm. Speaking of that tradition, so you're an ordained, is priest? What is the right title?
I went through the significant ordeal of becoming board certified.
Oh, no, no, no. I'm sorry. Not the chaplain. As far as
Oh,
your ordination goes.
lay ordination.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
I'll just say
what
this
would be
about
your
board cert.
title then?
Yeah, I'll just say this about board certification
Okay.
that I'm very grateful to Wrench and Bunce and some others. There were, I think, only 12 board certified Buddhist chaplains when I came along because it's quite hard not having gone to seminary
Hmm.
to jump all the hoops. But anyway, I think Buddhists should definitely take up chaplaincy. It's just our natural calling to relieve
Hmm.
suffering.
Hmm.
Lay ordination in the
I interviewed Renchen. I don't know if you knew that, by the way.
ah
Yeah.
awesome,
Yeah.
awesome.
Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. My apologies.
Yeah, she was a little bit of a support in that ordeal of going through it. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that you're asking about lay
Yeah. So
ordination.
you went through lay ordination, and that makes you a
Member of the Order of Interbeing.
okay.
And the Order of Interbeing's ancestors are the folks that Thich Nhat Hanh worked most closely with during the war to relieve the suffering. And he had the dilemma in the Buddhist tradition that he came into that the given response to the war was to stay in the temple and offer services and and the monastics should meditate, and more he saw a need for engaged practice. So
Hmm.
the Order of Interbeing started with 6 people, young people, that were willing to go to the villages that have been bombed and help them reconstruct that, or help bring in harvests, or tend to the sick and the hungry, and be totally grounded in the practice. And one element of this that's part of my calling in the Order of Interbeing is 1 day of mindfulness per week, where we're invited to disengage and really allow ourselves to settle and sink into the uh, more conscious practicing,
Hmm.
because the distractions are endless. So,
Hmm.
Order of Interbeing started back in the war, and I think now there's something like 3,000 members around the world. Yeah.
And do you guys have a local sangha that you visit? Like, is it a Sangha based organization? Are there local Sangha chapters?
Nirvana is, yeah, it's very much local, small sanghas,
Mhm,
and it's often based on listening to an excerpt from a talk and Dharma discussion and some sharing and meditating. There is one here in Sacramento. There was one in Davis. That Yeah, there are those sanghas all around, and there is a listing. There is an organized list of where they are. So if you travel, you could go visit one.
mhm,
Also, the monastics can join the Order of Interbeing. So it's both.
mhm. So Plum Village is sounds like it's eliminated into a, a mostly lay Order of Interbeing and then a monastic stream as well. Is that?
Yes, when Thai came as an exile to France, um, he created Plum Village as a refuge for Vietnamese
Mhm,
people, and gradually that took a turn toward developing a monastery. But it was very much a refuge for boat people and others to come to. It was rough, but it's organically morphed into the lay monastic sharing. We used to call it the fourfold Sangha, monastic brothers and sisters and lay brothers and sisters. And now, because our tradition is very much aware of creating welcoming systems and language, it's now the multifold Sangha,
mhm,
recognizing binary and other forms. That talking about Dharma brothers and sisters, we try to say Dharma siblings, not to
mhm.
be politically correct, but to recognize that there's many more differences than we used to think about.
It seems like a lot of people, what people complain is being politically correct is really just kind of being polite at a lot of times.
It's
You know,
it's being kind.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, so, do you guys are there retreats within the organization?
So yes, there's a monastery down in Escondido in California, and there's a couple others throughout the United States that give frequent retreats, and there's of course online retreats,
Hmm.
and um, there's days of mindfulness that you can do online with groups across the country. I sit with an online group once a month if I can to recite the 14 mindfulness trainings, which are my vows in
Hmm.
ordination that the Order of Interbeing members take. Most folks do study and maybe come to the 5 mindfulness trainings, but if you do the ordination, not unlike in Soto Zen, you take on more.
Hmm. And is there an explicit understanding that anyone who becomes a member, an ordained member, kind of leads a life of service to some degree? Like that kind of seems to be the vibe, right?
The vibe is Sangha building.
Hmm.
There's no pressure. And as my own teacher said, Helen, you're Sangha building at Sutter Center for Psychiatry.
Hmm.
Oh, or when there's been difficulties at home, oh, maybe I'm Sangha building with just my partner or my family. So Sangha building is not restricted to the formal meditation groups that we're familiar with,
Hmm.
but because I've been trained as a community organizer, that's my professional training years ago as a social worker who's a community organizer. I gravitate toward Sangha building, like creating family Sangha and helping SBMG have a big picture.
Hmm. So Thich Han, he formally he's part of the Chinese Linji lineage, actual Chan slash Zen lineage. Um, so do any of those kind of traditional texts or practices kind of filter down? Like, do you guys discuss koans, for example? Um,
Some do.
yeah.
Ty has written a huge number of volumes because his study of the teachings is a vast. So all of that is available that the individual sanghas may choose to study,
Mhm,
or students. And there are basic um, principles and so forth that, of course, you study before lay ordination. Uh,
mhm.
we don't have the systematic koan practice, as in Rinzai.
Well, even Chinese Linji and Korean San, they don't have the systematic. I mean, that seems to be a Japanese invention to some degree,
Uh,
as far
uh-huh,
as I can tell.
uh-huh,
Yeah,
uh-huh. I didn't know that. Okay, yeah.
yeah. A lot of times it's more like, "Who are you?" That's your koan for your whole life, or something.
Yeah, that doesn't go away.
Yeah. Um, cool. So I'm tempted to ask you about the training for ordination now, but I'm going to save that for the kind of the narrative story of your practice life. So maybe we could switch gears to that now. Okay. So did you grow up in California? Yeah. And where did you grow up? What was your family like, and that kind of fun stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah.
my ancestors.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up um, mostly. I had elementary school in Chico, California.
Mhm. So you're pretty
Sacramento.
local then.
I was. Yeah, I'm a native girl, and then I got out as fast as I could and went to that exotic place on the East Coast called St. John's College, which was the Great Books College at that time,
Hmm.
where people wore black turtlenecks. Now, they didn't do that in Chico. And I wanted to be in a place where people were asking deep questions. I was in love with deep questions. Um,
Did you
something
self-identify as a beatnik?
I was,
You're more from the hippie era, though, aren't you?
yeah, I'm more the hippie era.
Yeah.
But my brother was a tad beatnik and just a little after the James Dean era.
Hmm.
Uh, so all of that intrigued me as a way to get away from the small town atmosphere that I was being brought up in. My dad was a devoted dad, and for all kinds of causes and conditions, he had something in him that closed his heart every now and again. And he was a member of the John Birch Society and highly active in right wing efforts. Was very disappointed I didn't join the Daughters of the American Revolution because we have the lineage. And
Hmm.
eventually that was more and more uncomfortable for me to find a way, peaceful connection with all that
Hmm.
oppressive patriarchy from someone I really loved and who was very warm and kind most of the time. But every now and again, it would be my way or the highway. I mean, it was 1950s. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Well,
I recognize that my impetus toward community organizing comes from that desire for all people to have a voice because I hadn't had one.
mhm,
I hadn't had choices available. My job was to be quiet and good in growing up.
mhm,
So, what's the ancient twisted karma? Now I really speak up more than people appreciate sometimes.
mhm. Um, was there a religious current in
Yeah,
your household?
yeah, actually, my granddad was the architect of Grace Cathedral. So we were very Episcopalian.
Hmm.
And yeah, so that was my basic upbringing. But there also, I went to Catholic junior high school, and suddenly the mystery, the my upbringing was very concrete and contained, but here's this Catholic church with people singing in Latin and incense and fancy robes, and it was just so, oh, there's another way of living,
Hmm.
and sinfulness. So that by the time I was 12, I was very, very drawn to how do I become an instrument of God like St. Francis? Yeah.
So, did you explicitly believe in God?
Oh, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Looking back, do you think you had any experiences of, you know, like religious epiphany or, Holy Spirit or anything that you kind of now see maybe as a little bit of your true nature leaking out?
Barry, those are the experiences that we call moments of enlightenment,
Hmm.
moments of grace when the veil is removed, whatever the religious language is.
I didn't have any as a kid. I was
Uh,
very much a materialist, I guess. You know,
uh-huh,
I was fascinated by like wizards and mythology and stuff like that, but
uh-huh.
I was extremely materialist, and I got kicked
Same.
out of the Cub Scouts and the
Uh-huh.
Gifted Kids program because I was vocal about not believing in God. So it's not a given for everyone. But some people seem to have kind of that mystical bent from a really young age. That's kind of why I asked that question.
I, yeah, I guess. But how how could you be so questioning when you were a youth? How did that happen?
Um, well, I don't remember this, but apparently, I was at Sunday school and I kept asking questions, and I mean, I guess I remembered a little bit, and I remember the aftermath more, and they they actually disinvited me because I was like disrupting by asking what equivalent are like a 5-year-old theological questions, and it was, I guess, disrupting, and I remember just thinking like, this is a bunch of bullshit, or whatever, or however a 5-year-old would articulate it,
Where
and
did that come from?
I don't know. Good question. Because I've had a total of 0 religious discussions with my parents. It just wasn't part of our relationship.
So they sent you to Sunday school, but they weren't practicing. So that's set up questions, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Or yeah, maybe they went. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, my grandma was very, extremely devout Catholic, and so I'm sure that played a role into, at least me trying to do it. But yeah, yeah, but it just dawned on me like, oh, there's no God. There's just, science.
Mhm.
And then I blundered into the Grateful Dead and kind of shook that up.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I suspect I was drawn to a transcendent version of spirituality as an escape. You know,
Mhm.
it was like my life was very restricted and rather, I wasn't allowed to play with neighborhood children and do a lot of things. And I was very good and very quiet and very invisible.
Mhm.
So I think there was something in me that said, give me something more, please. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the God avenue, uh, make me an instrument of God's light. It was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go for that. Yeah.
Did you ever have any thoughts of being Episcopalian as women priests, right?
Mhm.
Did you ever have thoughts of having a religious career or anything like that?
I heard about all those young Catholic girls becoming nuns, and it was a little bit baffling to me. Yeah, I mean, in the 50s, things were so straight and narrow. But, then I was 22 and I took off around the world for 2.5 years to find a teacher.
Hmm.
But I was riding the tide of hippie life, drop out and tune in, and Jack Cornfield and others we were all heading east with the Beatles,
Hmm.
find a teacher. So that totally captured me, and
Did
I
you
was
ever wind
able
up in San Francisco during that era, like kind of the
to. Mhm.
like Haight Ashbury
I
scene?
had After graduating in 67, I had 67 and 68 in San Francisco.
Hmm.
Pretty pretty marvelous after a tiny little life in Chico. Yes.
Would you go to the human beings at the park and the Fillmore shows and all that kind of stuff? You got to experience all that.
One of my most treasured memories is you could put money in the meter and take a parking spot to just lie in the sun or whatever. And just the sense of empowerment among all of us dancing in the street or in the park, and talk about release. It was
Hmm.
just so exuberant. And Jim Morrison wasn't bad either.
So, if you don't feel comfortable talking about this, it's fine. But did you experiment with psychedelics at all?
Uh, I I had a dope dealer as a boyfriend for a while, and I knew he was testing everything that he sold, but I never quite had the courage to do LSD. I
Hmm.
did do mescaline a few times, and that was pretty powerful.
Hmm. Did that lead to what you would consider mystical experiences, or was it more recreational?
It removed the veil between our concrete reality and what else is there, and it also, opened up dimensions that I had not imagined. So it was all like life is not what you think it is.
Hmm.
Kind of basic beginner's mind. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's very refreshing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, how did that morph into an interest in Buddhism?
I headed toward Asia, as I said, for 2.5 years. I think I managed it more or less on $3 a day back then. And I stayed at a variety of ashrams going south in India,
Hmm.
visiting and kind of checking them out. And then went to Sri Lanka. And my habit in that trek, I would pick up different friends to travel with most of the time. But in that quest, I would connect with Peace Corps people who knew what was going on locally, and they also would have peanut butter they might share. So there was sweetness of a little bit of home life. And in Kandy, Sri Lanka, I asked my question, who's a good teacher here? And they said, "Oh, you've come to the right place. There's this very wonderful German monk who lives in the forest. You just follow this trail
Hmm.
and knock at the door of the hermitage." And I
Wow.
did.
I want to hear a lot about that. But before that, how was it traveling as a young woman by yourself through India and Southeast Asia? Was it sketchy? What did,
I
did it pretty
I
much go
was
well?
I wasn't stupid. I started my big trek with a European work camp up in Finland. So I had lots of friends to stay with. And
Hmm.
then when I got south, because I was hitchhiking solo, I realized, okay, now it's not okay. So then in youth hostels, you can always find people to travel with.
Hmm.
So I was rarely on my own.
Hmm. All right. So you're walking down a path and you see this hermitage and you knock on the door. Could you kind of paint a picture there what that was like?
I'll just add that I didn't get leeches, which is
Oh.
what usually happens when you walk down a forest jungle path in Sri Lanka, but no leeches. I knocked on the door of this modest little off-white building, and uh, I always get emotional here. Um, a, a man opened it, and I said, I'd like to meet this teacher, and he said he's just with a student, but come in. And eventually he was free,
Hmm.
and he spoke to me like I had never heard a human speak. The clarity was a bell. There
Hmm.
was no personality. It was just pure connection and communication. And Barry, he saw me.
Hmm.
I was just another hippie traveler, but he was glad to teach me walking meditation and was welcoming. I, I was just another skinny hippie traveler, and to be seen and talked to like that was like nothing I'd ever encountered.
So there was just something. Would I be? So it sounds like it's not. Wasn't just what he said. It was his vibe, so to speak. Is like his like presence.
His presence was so totally there
Hmm.
without all the soft spoken ways that we have of socializing. There wasn't any of that. It was just pure, you want to learn to meditate, thank you for coming. I mean, I don't remember the exact words, but it was just very direct and matter of fact.
Hmm.
We don't
And
need to do niceties. We get right to the heart of things, right to the heart. This man, I found out later, was a great person, Nyanaponika Thera, who wrote The Heart of Buddhist Meditation, which was one of the first books that introduced Westerners to Theravadan practice.
hmm.
I had no idea. Um, he changed my life.
And he had a sangha around him. Sounds like.
He was reviving the Buddhist publishing of the sutras that had kind of fallen apart. There was not a lot of scholarship in Sri Lanka and or in the Theravadan tradition. I gather, I'm not a reliable narrator on this, but he
Hmm.
revived the publishing of sutras and the translating and the teaching, and kind of revived a lot. He had fled to Sri Lanka because he was a Jewish psychoanalyst in the Jungian tradition, and
Hmm.
he got out of Germany with his mother, went to Sri Lanka
Hmm.
when he was where he was interned. So he also had all those experiences, and as I read his writings now, I can see he was such an engaged practitioner. He wasn't sit down on the cushion and meditate. He was really about living the practice.
Hmm.
And I didn't recognize that till more recently. But he had a very important role in bringing uh, the Theravadan tradition to the West.
Hmm.
Not that I knew it.
And when you say he changed your life, is that he kind of ignited bodhicitta in you, or did you already have that pretty strong? Like, in what ways did he kind of alter your course? Would you say?
I think it was that moment to be met and seen, to encounter a presence that was without any superfluousness. There was no adding and subtracting. It's just this right now, this.
Hmm.
To live that in that encounter, I saw this is the real deal. After all my wandering and dramas, this is the real deal.
And it sounds like you had visited non-Buddhist places too, so you weren't necessarily sold on Buddhism prior to this, right? Yeah.
No, in San Francisco, everybody was doing yoga and, more Hindu practice, but
Hmm.
I also wanted to try what Buddhism had to offer.
Hmm. How long did you stay there?
I was in Kandy about a month, And so I would diligently practice walking meditation, daily. I was just smitten. This is it.
What was the practice? Was it following your breaths, just being present of the sensations of walking, or like what were the actual techniques?
Very much the simple enormousness of every sensation.
Hmm.
The very contact suddenly opened up. Oh, this, this, this.
Hmm. And so you stayed there a month visiting, and would he give Dharma talks and stuff like that?
I I I don't know. It That was beyond me. It was just this encounter, and I think I went back only once or twice.
Hmm.
So there wasn't the Sangha experience. I mean, Candy itself is devoted to the temple and all these other things, but he was in a hermitage. And I have to say, Barry, one of the most amazing experiences was to find it in Thomas Merton's Asian journals, a picture of him at the little hermitage
Oh, interesting.
with Nyanaponika Thera. I mean, my heart just flipped. Thomas Merton was a very important teacher, and there he is at this little hut.
Hmm.
And what I have been carrying in my head, there was a photograph of it. Yeah, very powerful.
Hmm. So after you left there, what was next for you?
Well, I carried on traveling around the world and made it to Hong Kong and then back to England where I got engaged. Had a nervous breakdown, came back to the United States and returned to the safety of England where I was married to a lovely British fellow. And we had a family. In all of that, I wanted to reconnect with that spiritual aspect of my life. And so there were teachers in the Christian tradition like John Robinson that were very immanent kind of Christians that is not all about out there and over there. And it's like who we are right now. And so that was an inspiration to move toward contemplative Christianity, like Meister Eckhart and Thomas Merton. And so that's because there weren't any, I couldn't find any Buddhist things. I mean, that was too exotic. So it wasn't until much later here in
This is in
Sacramento,
England.
in England, and when we immigrated to California. It
Mhm.
wasn't till attending St. Francis Church here in Sacramento that we read as a Catholic book group. We read A Path with Heart by Jack Cornfield,
Mhm. Interesting.
and then I looked up, who is this? Where? Oh my gosh, it's in California.
Mhm. When so during this stage of your life, would you say you were still a believer in like a Christian
It's taken
greater?
years for me to adjust. I would say I had been saying I'm a Christian Buddhist for many, many years. Now I notice I'm so immersed in Buddhism that it is a little uncomfortable to be at some Christian services that are all about the external
Hmm.
governing our lives. I find that more difficult. That out there reference. I, I'm 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 here on the path with you, maybe your listeners, and I love the example of St. Francis and Jesus, but the set of hierarchical beliefs I can't quite fit with.
Hmm. Um, and so that was kind of your reintroduction to Buddhism, was reading that book. Yeah. Did you go out to can I remember the name of it? I don't
Spirit
know.
Rock.
Was that?
Jack at Spirit Rock.
Yeah, Spirit Rock.
Yeah, I got in touch with the publisher. I said, how do I talk to this person?
Hmm.
And it led me to Spirit Rock, and that led me to starting retreat practice at Spirit Rock. And then I had other Buddhist teachers, people with dementia, in a program I started with the city of Sacramento called the Triple R Adult Day Program.
Hmm.
And it was unusual at that time because people were basically hidden at home if they had dementia. So we brought them together to dance and sing and, do activities at the Hart Senior Center. And I noticed as I became used to being with people with memory loss, these people are living in the moment, and my agenda means nothing.
Hmm.
Because I'm a planner and community organizer, I'm all about agendas and plans and strategic this and that. And suddenly I was surrounded by people who were showing me this moment, this interaction.
Hmm.
This is where we're at.
Hmm.
All that is unnecessary. And I think that experience of working with wonderful families and people going through the suffering and some of the fun of memory loss in the right environment was a powerful push toward Buddhism.
Interesting. Um, did you have a main teacher when you were attending Spirit Rock?
I had several, and at this Triple R program, there was a woman whose mom was there, and I watched how she behaved when her mom died. And it was such an example of equanimity like I had never seen before. And I said, "How do you do that?" And she said, "Well, I'm Buddhist. I go to Sacramento Buddhist Meditation Group." So
Hmm.
that was in about 1996.
Can you share who that was? Or
It's my beloved friend, Barbara Reese.
okay.
She's on scheduling.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I got to be with her mom and dad in that program. And yeah, Dharma sister of the deepest heartfelt degree.
Hmm.
So she told me there's this thing at SBMG and they're meeting over at the Interfaith Service Bureau, a rickety building. And I showed up and I didn't quite get what was going on, but that was my guide. Barbara's way of responding to the loss of her beloved mother was so unusual to me.
Hmm. Did you and so did you start going right away, like repeatedly to SBMG, or to take a while to get?
It took a while, and I was doing retreat practice, and I had kids,
Hmm.
and I was a single mom by that point. So a lot of juggling. Um, what really got me to be a regular practitioner, Barry, was my older daughter took a year of Buddhist studies with Antioch College in in Bodh Gaya.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, so she went off to Bodh Gaya. And having been in India a bit, I knew that that was quite an undertaking, even though she was in a Buddhist studies program with wonderful people. So I vowed to sit every day to support her at a
Hmm.
distance.
Hmm.
And that was really the turning point of becoming a regular practitioner. I
And
didn't
she
have
became a
to.
Zen practitioner too, you mentioned, right? Yeah. Mhm. Um, and so eventually you wound up in the Plum Village tradition. Can you talk about how you discovered it and what the appeal was and kind of what your experiences were interacting with it?
I have some sort of irresistible drive in me for people to be able to voice their wisdom and their insights and their point of view and to be seen. I
Hmm.
think because of my upbringing where I was so quiet and invisible.
Hmm.
Um, my brother had been quite um, acting out a lot of our pain because it came from a broken marriage. So that was what we were suffering. And I saw that he got sent away to school at the age of 12, 500 miles away. And so I saw being invisible, quiet, and good was really the way to go. So I think this constant drive for people to be able to express themselves as part of community organizing and Saul Alinsky and all these other things, but it's also, backed up by Buddhism that we each carry the lamp, that we need to, clear off all the layers and come to who we truly are.
Hmm.
So I I just notice that as a constant thread in my life that I tend to help efforts where people can express themselves and accomplish what they want
Hmm.
together.
Hmm. And you found that in the Plum Village tradition.
There it was.
Mhm.
I thought to myself, who am I to join this Vietnamese Zen organization? I haven't been to Vietnam. But my partner Terry, who was we married, and he introduced me to Lynn Fine, and she came and stayed at the house when she taught at SBMG.
Is your partner a practitioner too?
Yes. And
Hmm.
he introduced me to the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition and to Lynn Fine. And I watched as time went on, and then we had decided to get married. And we both asked her, would you do our wedding for us? And she said, I'll do it with you. That was like that clear bell.
Hmm.
It's with the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition is horizontal. And so I realized, yeah, this is the person I've been waiting for to be a student of. So that was, I think, 2001
And you asked her explicitly to be her student, and she
explicitly.
has Dharma transmission from that lineage.
Yes.
Hmm. It does Dharma. Are there multiple layers of Dharma transmission, or did most people get it directly from Thay? Yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh.
Um, People become members of Order of Interbeing as a commitment to the practice. And then after some years, they may be noticed by others, which
Hmm.
was the situation for her,
Hmm.
or they may take on the preparation and study for lamp transmission.
Hmm.
Back in the old days, people put Lynn forward for teacher transmission because they noticed she was happy.
Hmm.
That also just grabbed my heart. Wait a minute. You're a teacher because people noticed you were happy? The Thich Nhat Hanh tradition has a lot of emphasis on joy and
Hmm.
play,
Hmm.
our full humanness. So all of that was very powerful message for me.
Hmm. Great. And what was it like working with her? Would you guys? She's not local, right?
She's in Berkeley, and initially it meant a lot of going down to Berkeley and a lot of, time there and time with the Sanghas there, and just a very strong involvement. Yeah. And
And
as time goes by, it's, more intermittent.
yeah, um, would you have one-on-one interviews with her, or is it more group activities?
Both,
Yeah.
all of it.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
And you would do retreats. Uh-huh. What eventually got you interested in getting ordained?
I am wearing this brown jacket, which
Hmm.
is what ordained people wear. You've got
Hmm.
your rakusu, but I've got this brown jacket, which is a worker's jacket in Vietnam. Um, and I was not gonna be in a hierarchy. I didn't want a brown jacket
Hmm.
because that's some elevated situation. But then when I talked to one of these Order of Interbeing members from England on at Plum Village, I said, "What is that brown jacket for? And doesn't it separate you from people?" He said, "No, it means I'm available.
Hmm.
When I put on the brown jacket, I'm available, whether it's moving furniture or listening or running to town or just holding a hand. I'm here and I'm available when I wear the brown jacket."
Hmm.
Whoa. So that was okay. I could do this. And it was really the formality of board certification for chaplaincy that pushed me, because you need to be ordained to
Hmm.
be a board certified chaplain. So
Hmm.
those came together.
Yeah. What was the preparation or training like for ordination?
I had three mentors in addition to my teacher that I was talking with once a week, and there were more retreats, and there was some listing of basic texts. There's a beautiful process of something called shining the light, when people who know you, who are experienced, come together to help you see what your weak points and strong points are, and what questions they have about whether you should be ordained. You write a long essay about what it means to you, and
Hmm.
that needs to go through the monastic channels to and the Dharma Teachers Association in order to kind of launch you into aspirant process.
Hmm.
Mhm. So all these steps um, took took a number of years. Yeah.
Hmm. Were you expected to like up your retreat hours or visit France to Plum Village, or was that part of your?
It's encouraged, but the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition is very much about practice where you are. It
Hmm.
doesn't require you to give up your religious roots, for example. You
Hmm.
can be a Catholic and an Order of Interbeing member.
Hmm.
There's the very first of the mindfulness trainings is not to be fanatic about being a Buddhist or being in this order, but to be open.
Hmm. And you went to France for the ordination ceremony. Is that correct? Was there a cohort where a lot of you did it at once, or how did that work?
Yeah, um, Thich Nhat Hanh was not available, and Sister Chan Kong was leading the 3 week retreat at Plum Village, which is where the ordination was due to happen. There were
Hmm.
two, so it was rather informal. There were two other people,
Hmm.
one American and one French, who one was heading toward monastic practice,
Hmm.
and the three of us had the ceremony offered to us by Sister Chan Kong and
Hmm.
the community.
Right. And there's so in Soto Zen Buddhism, at least, we do the Bodhisattva vows. It sounds like you guys do the 14 mindfulness principles. Is that correct? Is kind of as
Training,
your
trainings, yeah.
But what are your vows during the ceremony? Do you do Bodhisattva vows, or do you do those mindfulness principles, or like what's the ceremony
The
like itself?
14 mindfulness trainings is the Bodhisattva path.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Uh, it's it's about a commitment to the path.
Hmm. And in your
But
view,
this is central in my life.
mhm. And let's say somebody's in a life situation where they couldn't afford to go to France. Could you get ordained in America, for example?
That's been a big question, and yes, there is now. The tradition is constantly evolving.
Hmm.
So it used to be that Thich Nhat Hanh would come to California and do ordinations at Deer Park Monastery. And so that was how that happened. But gradually, transmission of doing transmission was passed on to other seniors. Yeah, senior members.
Hmm. Is there just one teaching authority in this tradition where you get lamp transmission, and then everyone's equal in that, or are there like
Yeah.
Inca, for example, like are there subsequent levels? No.
There's not a hierarchy. And even lamp transmission as teachers, Order of Interbeing, and lay Sangha members and lay monastics, it's
Hmm.
it's all one, it's all meant to be one plane. Of
Hmm.
course, human nature and all the adjustments since Ty died 2 years ago. There
Hmm.
are lots of,
Has it been 2 years? Wow. Okay.
yeah, fertile thinking about how do we carry this on in a way that stays horizontal, but we need to be functioning and have criteria and blah blah blah. Yeah.
What are the demographics of the sanghas like? Is it mostly older people, or are young people joining and engaging?
There's a phenomenal worldwide movement called Wake Up,
Hmm.
which is 21 to 35 or so,
Hmm.
hugely energetic, very big in England.
And
Uh,
is this part of the Plum Village tradition
yes,
specifically?
that's kind of the breakaway from maybe more traditional sanghas, is young people wanted that freedom to create, for example, sit-ins in Trafalgar Square or
Hmm.
marches in LA. So Wake Up has led to Wake Up schools, a lot of training of teachers, and just very lively. Yeah,
Is it a breakaway organization, or is it like it's part of the larger Plum Village?
we're learning from each other. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Cool. Is there anything else you could tell us about the Plum Village tradition that might surprise or delight someone in another Zen tradition?
um, they held the first People of Color retreat at Deer Park, I think, in 2008.
Hmm.
And I think that was fantastic pioneering work. I,
Hmm.
as far as I know, I don't know where other BIPOC retreats had been held, but Thich Nhat Hanh was very instrumental in allowing that to happen, encouraging it to happen. I mean, it is by its nature a tradition bringing together Western and Vietnamese practitioners,
Hmm.
and then to be more and more inclusive is at the heart of the practice. Yeah.
Did you
uh,
ever meet Thich Nhat Hanh?
I did not have a face to face, but I was certainly, I think I went to Plum Village four times, 5 times, or
Hmm.
Deer Park. So when he was there,
Hmm.
the last time, um, he was wheelchair bound, and he was brought into the big meditation hall, and he made eye contact seemingly with me.
Hmm.
Of course, it turned out afterwards everyone had the same experience, this intense eye contact because he could not speak,
Hmm. He had a stroke himself, right?
very severe stroke.
Hmm.
And the message of that eye contact was, it's like a cold shower. It's like, wake up. You're it now.
Hmm.
It's you. You're accountable for carrying this on, for showing up and being as present as like Nyanaponika was, or as Ty was. And it was so interesting that the other several hundred people all felt that
Hmm.
intensity.
Yeah.
It was such a teaching,
Uh-huh.
so deliberate,
Interesting. Yeah, it's great.
undeniable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we kind of covered everything I was hoping to ask you. Is there anything you'd like to add, or are you good with where we're at? Anything you want to talk about?
Let me see if I have anything I wanted to share. Uh, just I don't think anyone listening to this would be of a different mindset, but people sometimes have thought Thich Nhat Hanh's introduced mindfulness at Google or with police as a tool.
Hmm.
There's no way that mindfulness is a tool. It's a path. It's
Hmm.
always coming from ethical commitment. It's it's the path of awareness, kind awareness. So despite the prevalence of a lot of wellness oriented mindfulness that initially seemed to be kicked off as John Kabat-Zinn, but also Thai popularized it. I just kind of want to stress it's we're we're rooted in ethics very much, very much. Yeah. Right. I think the other great contribution that I've been inspired by in that tradition is they do include children.
Hmm.
It's it's
Is
every
that kind of your
retreat.
motivation for the family saga?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Every retreat, it's kids. There's
Hmm.
kids coming in that Thich Nhat Hanh is speaking to.
Hmm.
And the kids come up and they sit in the chair and ask their questions.
Hmm. It's
They're
cool.
respected. They are respected as, the Buddhas to be. And so seeing the family program, seeing the kids soften after the initial arrival when they're, maybe grouchy or whatever about being dragged there by their parents, watching the joy on the kids over a week of this immersion with the whole life of the community, whether it's Deer Park or Plum Village, or there's also a retreat center up here near Ukiah. It
Hmm.
it gets to everyone. That
Wait, are you talking
joy.
about the city of 10,000 Buddhas or something separate?
No, there's a something called Mariposa Institute. That's a
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
center.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I've been, like so many, an activist. This tradition is full of activists.
Yeah. Hmm.
And apparently, the monastics have often said, we should be doing soup kitchens and we should be sheltering the homeless. And Thai's response, amazingly, would be no. Our, our job is to offer this refuge so that others can do it. Our job is offering joy, which
Hmm.
is the most radical gift we can give. And that just was too sweet for me for a while. But the more I've lived it, when someone is joyful, others feel free from fear.
Hmm.
That is a gift. Then they can be who they are.
Yeah.
Our
Um,
being joyful is the radical gift.
One of my Dharma mentors, Kokyo Hinkle,
Uh-huh.
said something once that really struck with me. He says, before you can save other people, first you have to save yourself. Yeah, that kind of stuck with me. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Really
Thank
appreciated this.
you.
Yeah,
It's been delightful to be with you, and may you be joyful.
likewise. Thank you so much.